What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. Let's dive into a little thing we call the mailbag, where we interact with the people. It's very easy to get involved. You just go to my Instagram account, at my name, John Middlekauff, 2 Fs. Most of my former employers could never get that right. They only put 1 F. So Middlekauff. And you fire in a question and you get it answered here on the show. I saw a picture recently within the last couple of days going viral of Landon Donovan. He obviously had a receding hairline when he was playing, and he hasn't been playing for a while. And he must have got hair plugs that went wrong because, geez Louise, it looks terrible. He's got like hanging hair from the side of his ear. It's a bad look. And I don't have hair plugs. I'm a bald man. Not opposed to coming back, but did hear that they do remove. I know I had a friend that got them, and honestly, he probably needs to redo them now. But they rip them out of the back of your head, and as Joe Buck once, it's very painful. It is not a pleasant experience. But if it goes right, you look like Tom Brady. You look fantastic. Okay, let's go. We'll start with Wyatt. Huge Chiefs fan here. I was rewatching the mic'd up from last year's Super Bowl. You know the best part about rooting for sweet teams is like whenever you're bored, you're like, I'll just YouTube some sweet content from my squad. And it's always fun. That's the best. When you're a loser, like when you root for a awful team, which at some point in time you all go through, the off season when you're bored, you just it's tough reading articles like, hey, we got this 4th rounder in camp. It looks like a steal. It's like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. But when you're just sweet on top of the mountain, you just can never overconsume. You're like, yeah, I'll watch the mic'd up segment for the 17th time. Mahomes calls out to Rice, be ready for the ball, before he's even relayed the play to the rest of the offense in the huddle. How many quarterbacks in the league have a good idea who will be open on a specific play before they even break the huddle? Also, how many quarterbacks all time? I would say the ebb and flow, like in that situation, it's probably a short list. I think good quarterbacks throughout the week, when you have a good offensive coordinator and you scheme plays and you have a pretty good idea, this is going to be, if they're in the coverage, this is going to work. Right? So any good quarterback / good offensive coordinator, the communication is when we call this play, because you've schemed it up during practice, this is a touchdown, this is an explosive play. But I think what you've really seen out of Mahomes is obviously to become really famous and a fun player. I mean, nothing like winning Super Bowls, but like individual games as a quarterback are sweet plays, right? And for a quarterback like Mahomes or Josh Allen or Justin Herbert, it's like the 60-yard bomb on a rope. I mean, Rodgers did it forever, right? I mean, when I think Rodgers' best play of all time, it might be that Arizona Cardinal playoff game. I think it was like the wild card game where he ended up hitting the Hail Mary, but he scrambled in the end zone and hit a crazy play down the field. Like when you can do stuff like that, it's like, holy shit. But what makes a great player is like doing some basic things well, understanding when they blitz, where I have to throw it to immediately. When I hit the check down, do I hit the guy in stride or does he have to stop? And is it the difference between an 8-yard gain on 3rd and 7 for a first down or like a 3-yard, I'm tackled because I had to stop, the linebacker can make the play? I don't want to say he's mastered the position because I still think that probably takes some time. But relative to his experience, I don't think you can be any better because physically he has all the traits to do all the special stuff. And then when you master the mind game of playing quarterback, I mean, that's why, the 2 best quarterbacks of my lifetime, Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, and they had to because they didn't have the physical skills of Aaron Rodgers, they mastered the game mentally. So when physically they could match up with the mental game, they were an unstoppable player. And Tom's the best version of that. And I think Mahomes has become much closer to like Peyton and Tom in terms of I can just control a game. that we have to win 17-14. Obviously, when those guys have weapons, they can score 35, 40 points. No problem. On basically 90% of the league. And then against the best defenses, find a way to score 24, 28 points. But like, what happens in that moment when you and Andy are on the same page, when you know the defensive looks, when you've mastered the coverages that they run? Obviously, with the Super Bowl, you have multiple weeks to study the team. I guess they played the 49ers last year. I think they play again this year. They killed the Niners 2 years ago. It was right after they traded for McCaffrey. But I mean, in the two playoff games, I would say his first Super Bowl against the Niners, he's most famously known for the wasp play to Tyreek Hill, which was just an awesome play. This Super Bowl and really this playoff run, especially the last two games, the Ravens and the Niners, were about mastering the mental game. And that's what makes just all-time greats. And that's what he is at this point, because he was dealing with his best receiver was a rookie. And Travis, who I saw even admitted to, who was he talking to? He was doing an interview somewhere that, like, yeah, I understand that, at this point in time in my career, like, I come on and off the field because I'm an older player. I need my energy as the season goes on. Like, he's not, and Rashee Rice is going to get suspended. I guess, did they sign Hollywood Brown? They drafted Worthy. Like, he's going to be depending on some kind of random group of guys. Tony can't catch a cold. So I think Mahomes is just a pure joy to watch. Yeah, and this is what I said about Bryson. I was texting with someone the other day, like, has anyone ever made a better comeback, right? From like villain to like very beloved. And I think Kobe went from beloved to kind of villain to beloved. Now, obviously, that was because of everything that happened in Colorado and kind of the way he acted in the mid 2000s. But what makes, for the most part, like the most fun players of my life who have been great players are just kind of universally liked because it's enjoyable to watch them play. It's amazing if you just smile and look like you're having fun, how far that will go for the dude sitting on the couch for little kids. Like Brett Favre in his heyday was the most fun to watch because he was just out there. It looked like he was playing backyard football. Now Mahomes has like combined the two, but he's just a fun player to watch. He's an enjoyable, just athlete to consume. He's probably a little less enjoyable, this version of him, because they're not as explosive on offense. But like I just like Bryson was a lot of fun the other day because he was always smiling. And it's sometimes I think about that because I can be a little grouchy. I can be a little negative. Just put a smile on your face. Just be a little happier and things get better. So it's amazing how easy that trick is the older you get. Went to the U.S. Open Sunday, was truly an incredible tournament and one of the wildest experiences running up to the 18. Two guys with radios heard Bryson hit the bunker and everyone started running to 17, only to hear the knocks, only to hear that he knocked it in from 3.5 feet. We all dead stopped, turned around, and sprinted back to 18. The reason they ran to 17 is because everyone assumed they were going to go to a playoff. All-time classic for sure. Lucky enough to live in South Carolina and be near the action. Yeah, I mean, I've been to a couple golf tournaments, but I've never been to a golf tournament on a Sunday. And I mean, that's probably one of the more historic moments. There is nothing like being at a big moment in sports when everyone kind of knows it's a big moment, whether it be a tight playoff game, whether it be, I've been to World Series games, I've been to NBA Finals games. There's something special about being in the arena, right? Obviously, there's nothing like being the player in the arena, the pressure. And I make my living now off watching games. People are like, why don't you go to more games? Because I can't really afford to. Like, I got to see everything. And if I can't go to a game on Sunday because I'll miss everything that else is going on. And how am I supposed to talk to Colin, record a podcast when I haven't watched anything? Like, I'm not doing First Take here, where I don't watch half the things and just, shout out like I'm really aggressive. That's not what I do. And I enjoy watching the games. So I miss going to some big events, and that had to be pretty special. And I would imagine a lot of people listening have just over the course of your life, you're a big sports fan, have got an opportunity because you never know. That's the thing. You have an idea when you go to a playoff game, an NFL playoff game. Obviously, you know what's on the line. If you went to like a Final Four or national championship, you know what's on the line. But even some regular season games, some things can just turn into instant classics. A record could be broken. You can just watch something pretty special. And that's the great unknown about the reality television that is sports. I know people said that football was rigged. I'm maybe of the group that thinks that's not true, but I would say one of my favorite games I've ever been to in my entire life is the last day at Candlestick. And back at Candlestick, you could walk on the field 5 minutes before the end of the game if you had a media pass. And I got to go on the field. And this was the 49ers Monday Night Football, John Gruden, Mike Tirico against the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta was having a horrendous season, but they were beating the Niners. And they were, or maybe they were tied. I can't exactly remember the score, but they were driving to essentially win the game. And I'm on the field standing next to Chris Berman. It was just like this, and the place is fully packed. Joe Montana, every famous Niners at the house. Eddie DeBartolo's there. Boys and Men's going to play after the game. And Matt Ryan throws a pass a little behind, I think, Roddy White, lands in Navarro Bowman's hands, and Navarro Bowman takes it 75 yards, jumps into the end zone for a touchdown, and it clinched the Niners in the playoffs, and the place went berserk. It was just one of the coolest experiences of my life from in terms of sports. You just can't, there's nothing like it. You can only get those highs watching sports on television from gambling, I think. For the mailbag, with Netflix getting the rights for the NFL Christmas slate, do we expect a new commentary team to come in? Who would you like to see call these games? Or do you think they will ultimately end up doing these games? Was curious because Olsen's in limbo, situation, second in line at Fox, and potentially securing a spot with Netflix. I don't think Netflix, if I had to guess, and I'm not some like media reporter this way, I have no clue. Greg Olsen, you wouldn't give up. I know he goes, I mean, it sucks. Now, it's also understandable. They signed Tom Brady, is that he went from making $10 million to $3 million just because Tom Brady signed on. But listen, I'm not going to cry a river for a guy making $3 million calling football games, even though Greg Olsen's really good and I enjoy him. But he gets a big slate every single week. Now, you don't get the number one slate, but you still get really, really good games as the number two at Fox. But you wouldn't give up 16, 17 games a year just for one Netflix game. And who knows, maybe he can do both. And my guess is going to be that Netflix is going to outsource the production to a Fox, a CBS, a NBC, someone like that, and then use people to call the games. I'm not, unless you're terrible, I mean, god awful, it doesn't really bother me much. Because honestly, most crews I don't think are like that great, but also are that bad. They're just kind of meh. It doesn't matter. I'm there to watch the football game. I'm not looking to gain an education from these guys. I've said it forever. I would have loved, and Drew Brees is like bitter that he got fired. It's like, Drew, I have a ton of respect for you as a player. Not everyone is meant to have a mic in front of their mouth and entertain. Like, this is entertainment. And I don't think you're really tailor made for that. I think you should like run a team. I think you should be like a team president or a GM. If you don't want to coach, you'd probably be an outstanding offensive coordinator. But just because you're famous at playing football doesn't mean that anyone wants to listen to you talk about football, because maybe you're just not good at doing that. I mean, Joe Montana, one of the best football players of all time, was awful. A lot of guys have just been awful. I think Phillip Rivers would be really good. But I hope they don't do this, but I do think this is potential to happen, is they try to do some like famous non-football people with football people, maybe throw in a comedian there, do something like that. I would imagine anything's on the line. Now, I can imagine the NFL would just want a normal crew. But I don't spend that much time thinking about, you know, who should do what. You know, if you tell me it's McAfee and someone, I just, it won't bother me. Just do whoever, just throw on the game. Most people are going to have it tuned relatively down because of Christmas stuff. But my guess would be is they use crews from other networks. Gruden, okay, maybe Gruden gets back in the mix. Problem is he's suing the league. If I was Netflix, I John Gruden. Question for the mailbag: more of a coaching one than a scouting one. How do skill position players know when they have to get in and out of the next play, especially in the pros, where they don't use signs to get plays in? I've played soccer and rugby where you substitute one for one when play is dead. How does that work in football, especially if the quarterback gets the play from the OC? Well, on the sideline, you are screaming the the formations or the what's it called? I'm blanking right now. The not the position groups, but the I can't think of the terminology. But like 3 wide receivers, 2 wide receivers, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 2 tight ends, 2 backs, 1 wide receiver. Whatever that is, it is getting screamed from the sideline. So you know what groups you're a part of if you're a quote unquote role player. And then there are times when, a starter needs a breather, right? You see that all the time. Like a guy busts a big run or a guy's just exhausted and he'll kind of tap his chest like Christian McCaffrey or Alvin Kamara or a running back. Like I just need a breath. But I think with the signals, there are still guys screaming the whatever the group that's supposed to be in there on the sideline. And you're close enough, you can hear it and you just come off. It's not very complicated. And you've been doing it so consistently. Like in college, obviously, there are the signs. But in college, most of the guys playing in the pros don't come off the field that much. In pro football, you rotate a lot. There's also a lot on a given week schemed up. So you kind of have an idea like, hey, this play I'm not a part of, but you'd already be off the field. It's a relatively seamless transition. It's why when you see a delay of game for substitution issues, usually the head coach goes nuts because that should not happen because you practice it so often. Now, on the road in certain environments, it is louder, right? So it is hard. But I think these guys relatively are used to the ebb and flow of looking at the sideline and kind of knowing. I would say a well-run team has little to no issues with that. This question has been on my mind for the past few weeks. I would love to hear your insight. The quarterback talent that has been drafted from 17 to 24 has ushered in a new era of football and has replaced the legends of the 2000s and the 2010s. Yet only one of them has won a Super Bowl. Over the next 10 years, assuming Mahomes wins 2 on the low end and 4 on the high end. If Mahomes wins 4 on the high end, that's pretty nuts. Like, I think it's fair to assume the Chiefs probably win another one, but I'd set his over-under at 1.5. Like, if he wins 2 more in his career, he would pass Montana, and I think he'd be wildly considered Brady would have the best career ever, but people would be arguing he's the best quarterback ever. But I think he would definitely solidify himself as the number 2 quarterback of all time. Fly by the Mannings of the world. I think to avoid a cop-out answer, I am only going to give Mahomes 3. Giving Mahomes 3 is a lot. I mean, that would be win 6 Super Bowls. I know he's already won 3, but think of the gap between Brady when he won his 3 to the next Super Bowl he won. Right? He won his 3rd Super Bowl, 2001, 2003, 2004. Then they didn't win another Super Bowl till what, 2014 or 15? They lost in 07 to the Giants. They lost in 11 to the Giants. There was a wide gap of Tom Brady not winning a Super Bowl. And the difference is Belichick, like he was going to coach that whole time. Andy is what, 65 years old? So if Mahomes plays another 13, 14 years, is he going to be coaching till his late 70s? That's a variable here. Here's where I tentatively landed on this. Let me know your thoughts and what changes you would make. So Mahomes 3, 2 for Josh Allen, 2 for Jordan Love, 1 for CJ Stroud, 1 for Caleb Williams, 1 for Brock Purdy. I could not go 2 for Jordan Love. Could not do it. Because while he did show some signs of being Aaron Rodgers-like, Aaron Rodgers was Aaron Rodgers and rattling off MVPs. And beside Tom Brady, was probably the second best player of the 2010s. He did not get back to a Super Bowl after he won it. It is so different. It's so random. Because the other thing is you're going to have some random guys on really good teams beat you in the playoffs. I would drop all these numbers. I would put Mahomes lower. Have the Bills ever won a Super Bowl? The Packers have won 2 Super Bowls in 35 years, and they've had Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre. Caleb Williams, I can't assume he's going to win a Super Bowl. Let's see him make the playoffs. To me, Brock Purdy, you could go 1 for Brock Purdy. Might have to happen this year while he's on the rookie contract, and their team's going to be really good. Who knows what the team will look like after that? Maybe they'll be in a transitional period. I think it's hard to do this in the NFL because, like, what if the Lions were to win a Super Bowl this year? What if, what if the Eagles were to win a Super Bowl in the next couple of years? Their team's pretty stacked. What if Matt Stafford and the Rams? Their team's pretty good. I think it's impossible to play that game. And I think whoever you think is going to win Super Bowls always ends up winning less. There was a time after Peyton Manning won his first Super Bowl, you'd be like, this guy's going to win like 3, 4. Shit, he barely won 2. The Jordan Love thing, how many playoff games the Packers won over the last like 10 years? And again, I'm high on the Packers, but they couldn't win them with Aaron. Now they're going to win one with Jordan Love. Vince Young won the Rookie of the Year in 2006 and left so much to be desired for the remainder of his career. Is there any chance that CJ Stroud has a similar fate? Is the hype too much? Why is everyone in complete agreement that he will be able to compete in the AFC for years to come? If Burrow returns to what he was and Herbert takes off this year, he wouldn't be a top 5 quarterback in his own conference. Well, if I remember correctly, Vince Young was kind of playing hero ball, scrambling around. Like, Vince Young, his whole game was not predicated on throwing the ball. CJ Stroud dominated from the pocket. CJ Stroud's skill is a sustainable skill. It was like, no way Steph and Clay can shoot this many threes this consistently. And then like after 3 years, like, oh yeah, they kind of can. It's kind of what they do. If you play well from within the pocket, you are a good player. If you obviously have the arm and are accurate. Look at Jared Goff. Jared Goff has the skills. If you can protect him, he's going to be a good quarterback. He is an excellent pocket quarterback. Well, CJ Stroud is more athletic, has a little bit more potent arm, and he plays in a dome. So I think it's fair to, I'm with you, just to anoint him. Like, part of being Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, like, can you do this for 5 years? Year in, year out, every single year. Like, yeah, I might win the MVP this year. This is a big year for him. Plus, they were not a target team last year. They were not treated on a weekly basis like, we're playing the Houston Texans. They will be this year. So what's it like having the target on your back? But his skill and everything that I've heard about him as a guy, and you just watch him talk, he's clearly a high-level, great guy. People like him, hard worker. But, like, his skill transfers long-term. That's the thing with Deshaun Watson. You know, a lot of, and listen, Deshaun, when he was young, was awesome to watch, but it was a lot of outside the pocket scrambling around, making shit happen. That's kind of random. Like, it kind of comes back in to equal out over time. It was Russell Wilson's problem. He's not some great pocket quarterback, but early on in his career and in his heyday, scramble around, he would make these remarkable plays. But, like, what happens when you're just like 34 and you just have to play from within the pocket? Can you play from within the pocket? Right? Why does Zach Wilson suck? Can't play from within the pocket. Why did the Niners get rid of Trey Lance? Didn't think he had any pocket presence. CJ does. And when you have that skill and then you're accurate and you have a good arm, like, your floor is really high. Now, does that mean you're ever going to be the second best quarterback in the league? We got a lot to learn. But I would be stunned if he's not a really good player. Now, like where he ranks, we'll have to see. If he keeps playing like he did last year, he's going to rank pretty high. Hey, man, love the pod, but your take about Lamar has been horribly wrong. He was at the first 2 days of OTAs, mixed the next 2 days, and they're the last 2 days. Not sure how you got the misconception he didn't show up at all. I let it slide the first time, but when you preed it today, when talking about Rodgers, he missed all of OTAs and showed up to the mandatory minicamp. It's been well reported. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. But when you're Lamar Jackson, you show up to everything. You know why? Patrick Mahomes did. Josh Allen did. Every quarterback worth their salt does. Aaron Rodgers, 40 years old, doing drugs somewhere. Whatever. I don't care. But like Lamar, you're chasing Patrick. If Patrick's at practice, you should be at practice. Paying you $50 million a year. How's this debatable? Like, how could anyone go, yeah, this is a little weird. What's he doing? Why is he not at practice? I'll tell you who was mad. It doesn't bother me. I'm not a fucking Ravens fan. You guys screwed me when I bet $5,000 on you to win the AFC Championship game and you shit down your leg. One of the most embarrassing performances I've ever seen. Biggest waste of money I've ever had. I can't believe I bet against Andy and Mahomes with Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson skipping balls into the ground. I was the guy that believed. I was finally a believer. I was like, okay, this team, I thought Ravens were going to win the Super Bowl. And then you don't win the Super Bowl, and then you're skipping practices when Patrick Mahomes is at practice? Come on, man. Like, it's a bad look. Pay you $50+ million a year. Every time we have an event, you should be there. Period, point blank, end of story. What are we talking about? I'm not a journalist. It's not about facts, right? It's been well reported. He was nowhere to be found. Showed up at the end when you literally have to because you get fined. I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to get fined. He got fined $750,000 workout bonus. He didn't get. Why? Because he wasn't at practice. And I defended him like it's not very much money to him relative to how much he makes, though I wouldn't be in the business of giving $750K around. But like, there's no defending Lamar Jackson not showing up. There just isn't. Like, unless someone's sick or ill. But if you're just not showing up because you don't want to be there, like, is Patrick Mahomes there? Patrick Mahomes at practice. Because that's how I'd be looking. I'm chasing. What's Tiger Woods doing? He's hitting balls. I better be hitting balls. Michael Jordan's in the gym. Steph is in the gym. I better be in the gym. Not by myself, with my team. When my team's practicing. God, that performance in the playoff game was all-time embarrassment. Really was. Question for the bag. Given the modern landscape of the league and game, in a hypothetical 53-round fantasy draft, quarterbacks would fly off the board to start. My question is, how many you think would come off the board before taking a non-quarterback? I think I got this question by someone before. I think the number's a little smaller. I think the last time I got the question, someone wrote 20 quarterbacks. I don't think it would be 20 quarterbacks. I think when we got to about 10, let's do it right now. Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Herbert, for sure. As crazy as it's going to sound, Caleb Williams would go. C.J. Stroud, that's 7. Jalen Hurts. Like the Dak, Cousins, Purdy, Goff. You know, I mean, all that stuff's debatable. Am I missing any? Burrow. But you'd get pretty quick into like, wait, you're not going to draft Micah Parsons? You're going to draft Kirk Cousins over Nick Bosa? And I'm doing it off the cuff, probably left out a couple guys. I think the number's somewhere between 10 to 12. 10 to 12. If Kyle Shanahan was drafting, Purdy would go high. Goff. I mean, would you take Goff? This is a good example. Goff, who I'd now put above Dak and above Kirk Cousins because I see the guy playing well in the playoffs. Would you take Goff if you needed to start a team from scratch and you weren't going to, if you had the 10th pick and you weren't drafting again till whatever, 40 or whatever, 42, you do the math. You taking Goff or Micah Parsons, you could argue just take Goff, you got a good quarterback. I don't know if wide receivers, like I'm taking linemen before I'm taking wide receivers. There's so many wide receivers in the league. It's like, okay, you took, CeeDee Lamb in the first round. I'll take Amon-Ra St. Brown in the third or something. I would take the pass rushers, the tackles. I'd take I would probably go, depending on where I drafted, quarterback, O-line, D-line in the first couple rounds. With the new kickoff rule in place, do you think the kicker position as we know it is a thing of the past? Kickers are going to be involved in a whole lot of tackles, which leads me to believe we'll see an evolution of the kicker to a more physical body type than the scrawny soccer player we've become accustomed to. Well, the problem is you still need your kicker to make field goals. So, do you want Justin Tucker making open field tackles? Of course not. But like, are you finding Ray Lewis with Justin Tucker's leg? Like, part of the thing is what they do is pretty difficult. Has anyone ever just screwed around and had someone hold the ball and just attempt to kick like a 15-yard field goal? I mean, these guys are doing it with a pass rush, working the ball, fades, draws, high, low. I think it kind of is what it is. Now, if you can find a former tight end or a safety that's now the kicker, yeah. But there's a big difference in Justin Reed kicking the ball off as he did for the Chiefs and booming it through the end zone. Then, like, would the Chiefs trust him in the second half of a tie game to kick a field goal? I would doubt it. Obviously, he's not better than Butker kicking field goals, but most of the field goal kickers, they might miss, but what they do, you feel pretty good about, right? The handful of the top 10, 12 guys in the league. You would never replace that just because a guy, it's going to be an issue because those guys are going to be put in space and they're screwed. But you could argue a lot of players, if they're in a one-on-one position where a kicker usually is, unless you're Ed Reed or Troy Polamalu, you're not going to make that tackle. You're just at a huge disadvantage. Guys running full speed, you're backpedaling. You could argue it doesn't matter. If guys get to your kicker, and I would say this in the old kickoff back when more people used to return and where we're at now, I just don't. I just think you kind of acknowledge it. If you get there, you're kind of screwed because that guy doesn't exist. And what they do is just so hard. It's really hard to kick field goals. There's a ton of pressure. It's really closer to like golf or hitting where there's just time to think about it. It's just hard. Huge fan of the pod. I think you're undervaluing Aiyuk's impact on the Niners offense. Yes, of course, CMC is the most important skill player, but Kyle has never had more downfield attempts than he has with Purdy and Aiyuk. I understand that your point is Aiyuk is never going to have as many catches as Amon-Ra, but his impact with the ones he does haul in are more valuable. Aiyuk averages 17.9 a catch, meaning he would only have to catch 10 more balls to pass St. Brown's yardage for 2023. Maybe 100 balls may be too many, but isn't it entirely possible that he catches 85-90 as he continues to build on the work he's put in with Purdy? Not a huge advanced stats guy, but Purdy's averaged the most air yards per attempt this past season, meaning he is pushing the ball past the line more than any other quarterback. I believe Aiyuk is a huge reason for this. Doesn't having Aiyuk's medium to down the field ability to open things up for CMC in the box, his overall yak, monster numbers on the team, and their new over-the-middle slot weapon in Pearsall, I think Pearsall is going to be an outside the weapon, my man. I don't disagree with you that Aiyuk's a really good player, and his value is really, really high. Like, he's a high-end starting winning player. But does Kyle think that he can replace that with someone else? Because where it gets complicated is, like you said, his impact being threatened down the field matters. But can I find someone else to do that for a quarter of the price? Where this becomes a complicated conversation is he's laughing at $26 million. He wants $30 million. Well, part of my offense, like, can I find someone in a draft in the second round that can ultimately do that? Can I sign some random free agent for $10 million that can bring me 80% of his value for 20% of the cost, and then my team's better on defense? That's where this puzzle gets put together. In a perfect world, the Niners would get rid of, obviously for the next 5 years, they would rather have Brandon Aiyuk than Deebo Samuel moving forward. But it's a complicated situation because of the money. I'm not anti-Brandon Aiyuk. I just look at the way Kyle plays and goes, you have to understand too, they have other question marks moving forward. Trent Williams, one of the best players in the league, is 35 years old. So how are you going to get another tackle? You're either going to trade multiple picks to move up in the draft and try to get a guy in the top 20. Maybe if a guy becomes available, you trade a first-round pick and you break him off with a huge contract. Charvarius Ward, is he going to be on the team forever? So you're going to have to buy a corner. Your team becomes Purdy's about to get. We just saw what Trevor Lawrence got. Purdy's going to get that or not, if not more. It becomes a puzzle of putting money together. It's why the 49ers haven't just handed him this contract. If I was a betting man, they probably end up paying him. But I do think these conversations have been long and hard because Aiyuk, like you said, his value to the team, you just watch them play. He's a very valuable player. But is he an irreplaceable player? We're going to find out here in the next couple months. Because if the 49ers don't extend him and make him play on the contract, then they view him as a replaceable player. If they end up giving him $30 million a year, then they don't view it that way. I do think he's never going to be a top 5 wide receiver in the league. And paying premiums for guys, like I have no problem giving Nick Bosa a historic deal. He's one of the best pass rushers in the league. Fred Warner, one of the highest paid linebackers, best linebacker in the league. When they broke off Kittle, he was one of the best tight ends in the league. He's really good. And like you said, he's good with Yak. He's just a really good player. And again, I'm not saying St. Brown, like if you could just have a draft, who would you rather have? I like both players. But it's easier to justify when I throw one guy 120 passes. The large percentage of my targets goes through him, and not a large percentage of my targets go through this guy when I run the ball a lot. And like you said, you need receivers to move the defense around, but personnel groupings was the word I was looking for earlier. Summer brain's a little foggy. Drank a little too much last weekend. But yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with what you're saying, but I find these things very complicated. When you're talking about paying premium amounts of money for guys, like, can we do better? And listen, can you do better? There's no guarantee you can. And then you find yourself where you have a hole at that position. But I understand the complicated nature. Like Nick Bosa wasn't complicated. It was basically how much are we going to end up giving him? Christian McCaffrey wanted a raise. Got to do it. If Trent Williams goes, I need a raise. Got to do it. When Aiyuk says, I want $30+ million a year, you don't just write that check right away. You have long, hard conversations. They literally just drafted a wide receiver in the first round. Here's the other thing. Like Kittle's been banged up a lot now. They're going to need a new tight end. So you just have a lot of needs, and you don't have unlimited draft picks. And when you're good, you're drafting at the end of the first round. So it's not like you're getting Julio Jones every year. I just think these conversations are very, very difficult. This is a difficult conversation to have. I understand both sides. This isn't Justin Jefferson where it's like, yeah, it is what it is. CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown to the Eagles. This is like, God, this guy's really good, and we love the player, and he stands for everything we do. And that's why, ultimately, probably why they end up eating it. But I would understand, like, hey, you want 30, we want 26, we'll give you 27.5, but we're not budging off that number. Like, not every negotiation is like, well, blank check, you sign it. Steph Curry, you tell me. Aaron Judge, tell me the number. Ohtani, how much is it going to cost? That ain't this. That ain't this. And that's why I think it's so emotional, because Aiyuk sees all these other guys because of the position, and his team is not like kissing his feet, even though they like him. These are tough conversations because of the numbers we're talking about. They're really large, even with the cap going up. Is Brandon Aiyuk worth it? Is a legitimate conversation, no matter what side of the argument or where you stand. So I'm not a proponent of trading him. But if you told me they wanted to play this year out, like, I don't think that's that crazy either. I really don't. And I'd understand it from his side. Like, fuck you guys. Give me my money. Like, I get like, this is a very easy kind of situation to understand all the sides. I know my guy earlier thinks I'm a Lamar Jackson hater. Like, the Ravens, like, what are you going to do when they were going back and forth to Lamar? Like, you don't have a choice. You're going to pay this guy an ungodly amount of money. And that's what ultimately ended up happening. You can see the different scenarios here. That's where I stand on this. Like, if I had to bet, he's going to be on the Niners. If you had to bet if a new contract, ultimately give him a new contract. Do I think, yeah, we don't agree on a number. We want you to play on the $15 million, 14.5, or whatever the number is. I can see that. Trade, harder to see because you'd be trading him for a draft pick who does not help you now. But been following this league and sports long enough that you never say never. So I think at this point in time, until a deal's done, you have to acknowledge everything's on the table. And one guy who, some internet fans get mad at is Mike Silver. Like, I don't know. Mike Silver's known the Shanahans for 30 plus years. So when he reports on this stuff, he's kind of been right. So there's a little bit of an impasse. Like, there's a number the team thinks, there's a number he thinks. It's bridgeable. Doesn't mean it's going to happen.